In this letter, I want to honor what I consider to be the quintessential essence, the most essential essence of you. Now, there's a part of you that dreams. There's a part of you that goes outside of the frame of the general pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that defines our cult, that defines every relationship. Most of life is on autopilot, and the automatic patterns of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being create a very predictable and stable reality that is somewhat boring, definitely mediocre, moderately painful, and aching for something more. And you take the ingredients, the bits in any moment, pull them apart, and rearrange them in a dream. And say, what if this could happen? And this person could smile, and this person could be happy. And we could bring happiness to other people. Could show them that we know them enough to make them feel joy. How could that work? And your mind is 75% larger in that area than average. And so the pictures that you see are 75% more beautiful, more exciting than average because of the well-being that they create. Now, one of the biggest tragedies is that this impulse, this imagination, this combination of impulse and imagination is invisible 90% of the time. 90% of the time, there isn't even the time needed to articulate the possibility, but you see it and you see it stepped on. And you see it and you see it slapped down. And you see it and you see it obscured without anyone being present to its reality except you. You saw what was possible, and you saw it pushed down, pushed aside, knocked aside. And you see the misery, the mediocrity, continue over and over again. And for better or worse, like a 5-year-old magician, your greatest dream, your greatest wish is to see that mediocrity, that pain, that recurring boredom, to see it blossom, to see it open up into wonder, into joy, into beauty, into magnificence, and to be the conductor that opens that door, and to be recognized, and to be loved, and to be valued, as all 5-year-olds seek to be recognized, to be loved, to be valued, to be recognized as the source of the magic, as the source of the dream, of the happiness. And you have gone deeper than 90% of the people that I know into the mechanics, into the engineering of magic. You know how to create peak experiences on demand. It's just so few people invite that possibility. Right? You know how to create sustainable independence, and so few people want to learn it. You know how to create beauty, mentally, emotionally, physically, financially, and so few people can wake from the cultural dream to follow the scent, to follow the taste, to come alive in that. You don't like conflict. In some ways you are terrified of pain, of shame, of being beaten, of the physical violence you experienced when you were young, of the pain and invisibility that left you with the shame of unworthiness. You don't like asserting as a sensitive. And that creates a probability field in a world that invites you of great ease, of tremendous success, but in a world that doesn't see you, of so much stunted and stillborn possibility. I would say that the greatest hurt that you and I know is the arrogance, the flippancy, the chauvinism with which your feminine gifts of perception, of empathy, of enthusiasm, of joy in the presence, of transcendence of cultural norms, right? Ecstasis, ecstasy is so easy when you're willing to let go of the status quo, right? The knives are so sharp. I've got to go. This is weird. What's going on here? You're weird. The knives are so sharp of dissociation, of judgment. And the territory is so sensitive. The 5-year-old magician wanting to be seen, wanting to be adored, to simply be welcome because I made you happy, because I created something for you. That gift was never received by mother. It was violently and hesitantly received by father, but with too much sarcasm, too much grief, too much PTSD to really let it in. You've had months with a few lovers capable of experiencing ideal love. Now, the deepest hurt that we have is the recurring machine-like automatic deflection of those possibilities, and the subsequent shaming of the hurt and disappointment we feel, the patronizing humiliation, right? The dissociation, the silence and the aloneness. after the machine goes on, after the status quo does its bit and disperses. And all of those possibilities invisible except in your eyes. The more you love something, the more painful it is to lose it. But the most lonely part is to have what you love most swept aside before it was even opened, before it had a chance to be seen. When what you love most is invisible, and when the probabilities and possibilities are cleared out to reestablish the norm, the status quo, the boring mediocrity. When you see people continue lost, confused, alone, in pain and shame, uncertain, without realizing what they cast aside. There's nothing more helpless. There's nothing more painful. There's nothing more sad. And I've descended into bitterness, into rage, into addiction, into hurt, into pain, into loneliness, into a desperate loneliness that is very difficult to digest. It's hard to make sense of how so much beauty is cast away every single day in our culture, because it's not personal. And you understand, you've always understood that the way that people respond to these opportunities in you are the way that people respond to these opportunities inside. There is a you inside of each person, but it is a you that is ignored. It is a you that is marginalized, right? This part of the psyche in me and in the world is largely dishonored, largely misunderstood, largely invisible, and traumatically shamed, humiliated, and pushed away. The pain you feel is amplified 1 billion times as you understand that it's not personal. That the machinations of a cult, of a culture, continue, grinding up, destroying, ripping apart the most fragile and beautiful possibilities in favor of the norm, in favor of staying asleep. That pain can destroy you. It is destroying me. It has destroyed parts of my body, parts of my mind, parts of my heart, and parts of my life. It is like watching one's daughter be run over by a steamroller, while a driver laughs and texts on their phone again and again and again. with no one witnessing what is dying. It is hard for what is sacred for all of us. For all of us, right? For a redneck, it may be the perfect gun, the perfect shot, the perfect kill. For a racer, it is the perfect lap, right? For a pole vaulter, it's the perfect pole. But everyone aspires to beauty, truth, and goodness. You have a unique rendition outside of party lines, outside of the cultural frame. And when that possibility is violated, obscured, buried, it is the most painful thing, because our God, our goddess, our deity is being murdered as a probability. It's being rendered impossible. You bring the dish of possibility, and it's buried under asphalt without being tasted. It is horrific to watch the murder of one's gods. I'm sure some people would be traumatized by the smelting down of perfect weaponry. But to go through that again and again, alone, with no one understanding what was lost, is painful to the extent of madness, right? I've lost 40% of my memories. It's too difficult to look at the junction points where we could have gone here, but we went here. And we could have talked about the choice, but you cut off the time to do so. And you could have come back to make the time next week, but you lacked the humility to grasp your own arrogance. Right? We have been butchered in prayer 10,000 times. And perhaps the most depressing element of my life, the most depressing pattern in our life, having had recurring themes of butchery over and over again, is pulling back myself from joy, pulling back myself from life and from love, because the pain of the butchery is so severe that I don't want to extend to have it be clipped one more time. And I understand that the statistics are not good. Right? We live in many of the areas that are most important to us in a 5% probability field, meaning 5% of the time, the beauty, the truth, the goodness in our prayer, in our version of God and Goddess, of what's sacred, is honored to some degree. And 95% of the time it is not honored, is invisibly rejected, sometimes even judged instinctively, simply because it's different, right? Every cult has an immune system whose job is to keep out foreign objects. It's called the curse of being weird, deviant. These are curses through the eyes of the cult. Right? To deviate from the norm, the mediocrity in the middle, means you do something exceptionally good or exceptionally bad. The middle is average. But a majority has an immune system that is simply geared and tuned to deviation. If it's different, it's bad. A small minority seeks the unusual, seeks the most important question in deviation. Is it deviating to be beautiful, or is it deviating to be unusually ugly? This is the experience of being murdered by the masses again and again. It's one of the few areas that the myth of Christianity seems relevant, because Christ brought a better way of doing things, a better operating system, was herald to the empathic brain and the empathic operating system, and was crucified not for being inferior, but for being different, for deviating from the status quo. And the majority always has the power to define what the status quo is, to elucidate what the deviation from the norm is, and to persecute those that step outside of any box. That power, through the law of mass, the law that says that when a pinball and a bowling ball collide, it does not matter which one is going in the right direction. The only thing that matters is which is the larger object. The pinball always bounces off the bowling ball, even when the bowling ball is heading over a cliff and the pinball is pioneering a constructive new path. The law of mass is not about good design. It is about size. And whether it is the giants of our parents traumatizing the innocence of our children, whether it is about abuses of power in governments, tyrannizing the healthiest aspects of the opposition in power, or whether it is the mindless majority deleting the minority from the probability field by choosing not to listen, by choosing superiority as a perspective. It takes more work to be a pinball. It takes hours and hours and hours of careful and conscious thought to intelligently deviate from the majority. And yet the majority can knock that pinball down traumatically simply for being different. This is the grief I carry in my body. It is heartbreak. It is tremendously painful. But I honor you. I honor you for the work that you've done. I honor you for the love that you have. I honor you for the innocence of a 5-year-old who just wants to bring a smile to a mother's face that is incapable of feeling, is incapable of being touched. I honor you for the pain that you feel. Pain is the separation from and longing for something that you value. And you know the value of what you long for. And you see the gap. And in a sad way, we are caught in a stagnation because the pain is so strong each time it is unconsciously brushed away, that to go through 95%, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, to go through all those traumas, all those lonelinesses, all those frustrations, all that incredulity, all that shock, all that sadness, all that disappointment, for the 5% that warms to it, that opens to it, that comes alive to it, and says thank you, and then usually goes away. There's too much pain and not enough nourishment for this part of us. The temperature is too cold for this part of us not to develop frostbite over and over again. So I have killed off some of that part in order to function. I have put it on ice to get through the day. But in doing so, I have killed much of our soul. And feel the exhaustion, the depression. At what I do over and over and over again. I turn to addiction. I turn to dissociation. It's too painful to cry those tears alone. And so I wanted to make this video for you. I see you. I know who you would like to be in the world, and it's beautiful. I know what your deepest desire is, and the world would be a better place were it to manifest. And I see that you're stuck. It's like being stabbed in the chest with a knife that people pretend is not there, and react fearfully if it is acknowledged. You just stabbed me in the chest there. Oh, don't be so melodramatic, says the patronizing voice of the cult. The pain is real. The disappointment is enormous. The grief is real. And yet it is invisible. And so it's very difficult to empathize with, to hold, and to know what to do with it. Right? Because much of the cult simply wants to maintain the status quo. It is possible we will destroy our life just in the helpless, mind-numbing outrage at so many crimes in so many ways. I think of the school shootings, and I think our adolescents feel this pain and have no more way to deal with it than you and I. They lack a voice, but through thousands of hours of practice and hundreds of books and thousands more hours of therapy, you feel their pain and have a voice. And so I offer this voice in validation and in comfort to your pain, to your grief. And with compassion for so much to carry with so little skill and so little support within the culture. I'm sorry you have been left alone here on ice for so long. And thank you for listening to me.